Sarge, there's a rebel line!
Firing by volley. Ready! Fire!
Form a line, boys!
Aim!
Fire! Reload!
Fire! Company! On me! Forward! Incoming artillery!
War of Rights is a first-person shooter made with the power of CRYENGINE, which currently focuses on the Maryland campaign of 1862. This was the turbulent and bloody time of the American Civil War, where family and friends became foes, each marching to the beat of the drum and fife. You, the player, can play as a young private, foot-slogging his way through the battlefield, as well as anything in the grades up to Major General, where you will be at your headquarters relaying orders to the various units under your command. As mentioned before, we are envisioning as historically accurate a game as possible, so players will march and fight following the Napoleonic tactics still adhered to in the era, and as representatives of any of the units in the Army of the Potomac, or Army of Northern Virginia which fought in that campaign. We are also looking to include not only the important infantry, but artillery and cavalry as well, each bringing their own carnage to the battlefield. As you can see, we have done our utmost to make sure that every part of the map is as accurate as possible, with little exception. Furthermore, most every building, from main houses to spring houses, will be enterable. Our game will also feature customization of each player's soldier, though these customizations are more cosmetic than they are beneficial. But this will allow variations to both your character's features, as well as his clothing and accoutrement. But beyond the characters and game comes the models of our weapons and gear, all of which are modeled to look as accurate as possible, which also includes a selection available to you. For instance, we have been asked several times about including the Gatling gun to the game. However, it was not used in the Maryland campaign, let alone much of the war, so you will not be seeing it. However, you will be seeing any of the many artillery and long arms used by the army, such as the Springfields and Enfields, the Colts and Remingtons, the Sharps, the Whitworth, the Ordnance Rifles, or the Napoleons, amongst others. These weapons will also react to the beating you put them through, becoming fouled by continuous use and in turn making it harder to load, and upping the chance of a misfire. Finally, each of our maps are a work in research and development that are years in the making. The Maryland campaign itself would allow us to bring 4 maps out at first for players to fight on, each of which are the largest maps allowed in CRYENGINE, at 4 kilometers by 4 kilometers, or 2.5 miles by 2.5 miles for those of the more US variety. This does mean that a few of the larger battlefields, like Antietam and South Mountain, that we have had to condense the real-life locations of so as to include the most important parts for the sake of playability. However, all the scenes thus included are still historically authentic, with great care taken to things like furniture, window dressing, even rainspouts. In the future, we have more maps in mind, with the hopes that we can continue our goals of making a fun while still educational game.
I'm upset with everyone.
Get everybody to the right of Jeramu to form a back rank, please. To the right, not the left. Believe me, you conscripts aren't gonna last a day out in the open.
Alright, guys, you ready? Company, fire by company! Company, ready! And... Ah! Alright, go ahead and shoot him, boys!
I wonder if...
Get on now, fix that bayonet, and get on after you! Come on, boys!
Papa?
This is some Yankee wallpaper.
Join the 6th Alabama today. We eat kebabs and kill Yanks.
You look like a kebab.
You know, then bam, you go to war. Like, it's not one of those, bam, you're right into battle, still in camp, and then if you want to go in battle, you're in battle.
Sir, please restrain from firing at the campsite. Okay, thank you.
It wasn't me, the musket discharged on its own. They never gave me a cleaning kit.
I like how it looks like I'm like the only one who. Oh wait, no, there's another guy's got a net on.
How do you think we're roasting marshmallows?
Christmas tree, thy leaves are green forever. Oh, Christmas tree, thy beauty leaves thee never. Thy leaves are green in summer's prime, thy leaves are green
Company, get ready! Found by company!
Set for 500 yards, boys.
Get ready! Get ready! Aim! Sarge, there's a rebel line! Fire! Bluebelly's incoming, Sarge!
A gallant gentleman, a professional military education, and a hero for their soldiers. Those are the fighting men of the U.S. Officer Corps. The majority of soldiers during the Civil War were enlisted men. They made up the bulk of the fighting force. Above them were the so-called non-commissioned officers like sergeants, first sergeants, or sergeant majors, which also drilled the enlisted men and made them ready for battle. Periods, the NCOs were the commissioned officers. While those officers had more prestige than regular privates, they also carried added burdens, since they were accountable for all the soldiers under their command. The rank of a commissioned officer was displayed on the shoulder boards. No insignia for a second lieutenant, 1 gold bar for a first lieutenant, 2 gold bars for a captain, a gold oak leaf for a major, a silver oak leaf for a lieutenant colonel, a silver eagle for a colonel, and 1, 2, or 3 silver stars for a general, depending on his seniority. One of the most important ranks on the battlefield was the colonel. A colonel had the command and administrative duties for a regiment, made up of varying numbers of companies. The colonel was expected to lead his regiment into battle personally to ensure that it performed to its utmost ability. For this reason, colonels are often killed or wounded in action. The rank insignia for a colonel is an eagle, which is a stylized representation of the eagle dominating the Great Seal of the United States. He is also equipped with an 1850 U.S. foot officer sword, which is not primarily a weapon, rather it is, above all else, another insignia of his rank, a sign of his authority and a tool to command his soldiers. At close combat, the colonel will use his Colt revolver to defend himself. Now it's up to you, soldier. Will you join the ranks of the common soldiers, or will you lead your boys to victory? See you next time at the Fighting Men of War of Rights. A Southern gentleman, a professional military education, and a hero for their soldiers. Those are the fighting men of the Confederate Officer Corps. The uniforms of the Confederate Army were very colorful and unique, with the Officer Corps following a traditional French and Austrian-styled uniform. The most prominent and recognizable feature of their uniforms were the sleeves and kepi braids, which followed a French style. A single band on the sleeve, or kepi, represents a lieutenant, 2 bands for a captain, 3 for a colonel, and a very large braid of 4 bands for the general. Unlike the Union, the Confederate officers had no shoulder boards to display their ranks. Instead, the rank was displayed on their collar and closely matched the Austrian rank insignia. They had golden bars, stars, and embroidered wreaths, which were worn to distinguish between all officer ranks from second lieutenant to general. Now it's up to you, soldier. Will you fight to preserve the Union, or do you support the Southern independence? See you next time at the Fighting Men of War of Rights.
Here they come, boys! Fire!
Strong discipline, its unique uniform appearance, and its tenacious fighting ability. Those are the fighting men of the Iron Brigade. The Iron Brigade soldiers were issued with gaiters, which tried to protect the trousers and keep dust and stones out of your shoes. Beside that, the brigade was equipped with the powerful Austrian Lorenz rifle. But their most recognizable feature were their hats. The so-called Hardy hat was the regulation dress hat for an enlisted man in the Union Army. The most prominent wearers of the Hardy were the soldiers of the Iron Brigade. Now it's time to choose your side, soldier. Will you join the ranks of these Western regiments, or will you drive them back through the cornfield? See you next time at the Fighting Men of War of Rights.